In this demo, we'll implement support for HateOS using dynamics and anonymous types. If we look at what we did with the getAuthors action, we see that that one no longer returns a list of author DTO. It returns an IEnumerable of Expando object, a data-shaped version of our author DTO in this case. So we cannot just extend this data-shaped object with a links property through a base class. Instead, we can use an anonymous type approach. But let's start with a simpler case, one author. For that, we will work with the getAuthor action. First, let's add a new class to our models folder for our link DTO. So we name it link DTO. And we give it properties for the three values we talked about on the slides: href, rel, and method. We also add a constructor accepting href, rel, and method, so we can easily construct it. On to our getAuthor action. We want to add a property, links, with a list of links to the response body. So we add a helper method and we name it createLinksForAuthor. To create these links, we need the input parameters of the getAuthor action, so the author ID and the nullable field string. Let's add a variable to hold these links, which is a list of link DTO. At the end of this method, we will return this list. Now let's create the links. First up is the self link. That's the link to the resource itself. If the field string isn't null or white space, we input it as well when creating the self link. And here is where this is starting to shine. Once a client application has an author, we can decide that we will now let the client application create a course for an author. We are now truly driving application state. We are deciding on the functionality of the consumer. What can the consuming application do next? In this case, it can now add a course for this author. And it knows this from inspecting the response, which will contain a link to do that. But to be able to create such a link, we need to be able to refer to the route to the create course for author action. And that is on the courses controller. Here's that create course for author action. Let's pass through a name for the route so we can refer to it. Back to our authors controller. And we now add a link to create course for author. We'll give it a rel value, create course for author, and the method is post. Something else we can do is add information on how to navigate through our API. An author has a list of courses, so we can add a link so the consumer of the API knows how to get these courses. That link should refer to an action on our courses controller, get courses for author. So let's give it a name so we can refer to it. And let's switch back to the authors controller. And let's add a link. There we go. So like this, we see that we can drive application state through these links. If you have a link that should only show up when a certain business rule is met, like the example we saw on the slides, this is also the place where you decide whether or not to include that link. What's next is adding these links to the resource body. Let's scroll up to the getAuthor action, and then we can create these links. So we call into createLinksForAuthor, passing through the author ID and the fields. Then we need to add these links to the response. As we know, the shapeData action returns an Expando object. And that's an iDictionary of string and nullable object. So, if we cast it to that, we can add properties by adding a new key value pair. So let's do that. Linked resource to return is now an iDictionary of string nullable object. And we can simply add our links to that. And lastly, we return the linked resource to return variable. For that we use the OK helper method. That should be it. Let's give this a try. I've got a request lined up here to get an author. Let's try sending it. And there we go. We get back the author, and we also get back the links we added. Let's try this same request combined with data shaping. This too is a request we previously sent. Say we want to get the ID and the name. And there we go. That's exactly what we get back. And in the links we can now also see that the self link contains the field's query string key and value. There's another place where we return a resource, right after creating it. Let's see if we can add HateOS support there as well. When an author has been created, it's returned to the client. It makes sense to also include these HateOS links there. We're looking at the create author action on our authors controller. We've got an author to return here. This is the object we want to add those links to. Let's generate the links first. We call create links for author, passing through the author ID of the newly created author, and null for fields. There's no data shaping implemented on post. Then we need to add these links to the response, and we need an expando object for that. So we somehow have to convert our author DTO to an expando object. The good news is that that's exactly what the shape data extension method does when we don't pass through fields. So we call shape data on the author to return, and we pass through null for the fields. We then cast that to an iDictionary of string nullable object, and we add the links we just generated to it. Lastly, we want to return this linked resource to return. So we pass it through to the created at route method. Like that, it will end up in the response body. This created at route method also required us to input the author ID of the newly created author. We can get that from the expando object. As we know, it is a dictionary of string nullable object, so we can use the indexer passing through the property name as key, in this case ID. And that should be it. Let's give this a try. Let's search for a request that will create an author. Here's one we used in the past, so let's give this one a try. And there we go. The author is created, and HateOS links are returned together with the newly created author resource. So as you can see, we could reuse most of our code. So it's often a matter of writing it just once. Up next is a collection resource, authors. That is a bit different from what we've done up until now. Let's check it out next. In this demo, we'll implement HateOS support for our authors resource, a collection of authors. We're looking at our authors controller. Just as with a single author, we will want to add a method to create the links. We name it create links for authors. It accepts the authors resource parameters object, as we'll need those to create the links. Just as the create links for author method, this one too returns an IEnumerable of link DTO. Alright, so let's create the links. First of all, we need a link to the resource itself. We've got a create authors resource URI method here we previously created, and we can use that to generate links. After all, it already contains the code to generate links. Let's just add another resource URI type. We'll name that current. We can use it to refer to the current resource itself. And we make sure that when resource URI type.current is requested, the link to the current resource itself is returned. That's the default link. Now we can call that method. Let's add a link to self by calling create authors resource URI, passing through the authors resource parameters and current as resource URI type. Rel is self and the method is get. There we go. And that's already it for now. The authors collection resource cannot be deleted nor updated in our implementation. On to the get authors action. We want to add the links to the response. But we also want to wrap the response in an envelope, as we learned on the slides. First, let's start with creating the links. For that, we call into create links for authors, which is our newly created method, passing through the authors resource parameters object. We then shape the data. That's the code we previously wrote. It returns an IEnumerable of expando object. And for each of these expando objects, we need to add the author links. So we select each of them, cast each item to an iDictionary of string nullable object, and add the links. This is likewise code as we've used in the get author action. That's it for the links for each individual author. What we need to return, as said, is a resource with these shaped authors with links as value for the value field, and the links for the authors resource as value for the links field. So we create a new anonymous type with shaped authors with links as value and the links as links. Lastly, we return that. And that should be it. Let's build and run and give this a try. Let's send a request to get the authors. And we get back a response with a value and a links field. Value is an array of author, and each author contains a set of links related to that author. And if we scroll the way down, we find the links that are related to the author's resource. That's pretty cool, right? But we're still missing something. Let's page this collection. Let's send that request again. And let's have a look at the headers collection. The expagination header contains a potential previous and next page link. But should these links be there? Is this custom expagination header the best place for them? Let's have a look. As we mentioned when we looked into paging, HateOS also has a place in that. These next page and previous page links are not pagination metadata per se. They are in fact links that drive application state, going to the next or the previous page. So they don't really belong in the custom pagination header. They belong in the links collection of the collection resource. So for collection resources like our authors resource, this is also where we'd include pagination links. Let's fix that in the next demo.